Extensively as a teenager, David he visited over 60 First Nations communities in Canada and the U.S. He's a member of the Douglas First Nation and draws on his Indigenous heritage and experience as a designer. David is a graduate of the U of M Master's Program in the Faculty of Architecture and has worked at Prairie Architects for 6 years. Welcome, David.
I just want to thank my dad for being here tonight. And my drawings are really messy because I did them all laying in bed. Most of them, except the last few. So this is a work in progress, something that I started after I was doing my thesis and just had the time to start drawing and thinking again. When I started architecture school, I had to draw, I realized I had to face the issue of identity and Aboriginal identity in architecture, and this is what I at the time was looking at, and I thought these things don't really resonate with me, they don't mean anything to me, I had no connection. So I started to do some projects, and this is one here, it was like an urban reserve project. I don't know even how it came to be, how I started doing it, but it was like what made me do it, but it was on Princess, and it was in exchange, and when the project was done, it just had this kind of weird dynamic that just kind of pulled things in a different way, and I thought I'd explore them. So when I started my thesis, I did a whole bunch of, I was in New York and I saw like Louis Kahn's large drawings that he did, like 12-foot charcoal drawings, and so I started doing these big collages, trying to get these ideas out, kind of going through like an emotional kind of thing with how am I going to do this, and kind of explore my culture, who I am. And so I started doing all these collages, and I had like a copyrighted photo in here, so I had to erase it. So. But these are just a bunch of collages I threw together, and then after I got that out of my system, I guess I started to just explore the ideas of what I wanted, how would you express an Aboriginal architecture, what it meant to be Indigenous, and I noticed the elders always just they always sat and thought, so I started putting together this meditation space, and I started doing this big collage, and I realized, okay, it's not just sitting and thinking, there's something more to it. So I started to dig deeper, and I realized it was about gatherings, and it was about storytelling. There was something that was in traditional knowledge that went back for thousands of years that was still resonating in our people in Peguis, and it was in gatherings, and this is a gathering space. I was thinking of like a powwow or a music event or a hockey game. But there was something communicating that was taking place, and it was more than words, but it was like rhythms and patterns and something in language that was very, very deep, and it was way beyond words. And this was a political gathering. I started to develop this idea of these types of gatherings, and it went into this kind of global Indigenous gathering scenario. And in the end, it designed a building, which was a reception center in Netley Creek, and it would just flood. And in the end, the architecture didn't matter. And I remember my final presentation saying, the architecture doesn't even matter. And I thought, okay, I'm going to get kicked out since I said that, because I was in school 10 years and it didn't. So about 2 years ago, or about last year, I started just sketching, and I put all these drawings up last month and took a photo of them. But there's this big ship that's inside across from the Lineup Cafe or Lineup Restaurant, and I started drawing these ideas of the idea was reclaiming who I was and growing up in the city and exploring all the secret places downtown as a kid, and going through every door I can get into and every back alley and stairwell. And then I started putting the circus, the things that I experienced as a kid, and I started trying to reclaim who I am in these as an Indigenous person. And in doing that, I reclaimed, I guess, the city in myself. So I started putting these ideas together in movies, hot rod cars, from Peguis, and driving from the reserve, coming to the city, going out to Peguis, and this sketch is actually I was thinking, okay, this ship, that the city just grew over the ship, and the mast went in through the windows, and the laundry was mixed up with the mast of the ship, and these things got all integrated, and it was all claimed in this part of the city, where the city was an Indigenous city, and it was occupied by Indigenous people as if we had always been here. And this is where I've always been anyway, so this is my city, this is my territory. So I started creating a narrative of these things, and these sketches are just skimming the surface of about 100 sketches I did just before I go to bed. I did an 8-foot drawing at the head of my bed one night before I went to bed. And I just sat there, and my dad would walk in. I don't know what he'd think with my room, because I just had the walls all plastered with drawings, and be like that for weeks. And they turned all these ideas. I thought, okay, there's this glacier, and it carved through the stone rock, and it created this train, and this indigenous people, they had the technology to use this train, so they put this thing back together, and it came from Churchill back into the city, and I was, just throwing all these ideas around. And the reason I was doing that, actually I worked with Gary, hired me out of undergrad, Gary Hilderman, and did research on burial mounds, and started finding out about all these cities, that had 500,000 people, aqueducts, and they had observatories, and they had, there was conventions, and it was whole society, intense, and it all stayed with me. So I started trying to imagine what that would be here, and mixing all this stuff up. And then I did a bunch of video stuff with my brother, and I did a bunch of, I was he's a designer, did a bunch of matte paintings, and I built a 1:200 scale model of the exchange in my garage one day. So I lived in an industrial park, I just built it, and I started looking at it, and these drawings came out of it. They're the circus when I was a kid, and they're movie palaces. They're the rooftops where I always felt the dreams take place in the rooftops, and there's dreams and visions in the bricks of the back alleys in the city. This is waterfront where it meets the river. There's a floating city, and there's these wizards, little carts, and that's the canal opening that goes into the city, which goes through the exchange. And there's the exchange. This is in front of Prairie Architects and Gary's office. And there's some theaters, and they're all Ojibwe, and this is owned by indigenous people. So it's how I see my place in the city, I guess. And so I had sketches, charcoal drawings, video clips, a whole bunch of animations I just did in 2 hours. And then at one point I even forgot about this one. This is just a bunch of images. This is actually a clip from a video animated with an air balloon. And I was trying to bring in the cool cars that we had as teenagers in the 70s. Pegasus. And it's just a work in progress. I'm hoping to turn it into a little short film